My name is Margaret. For 66 years, I had built a life on certain, unshakable truths. I knew the satisfying ache of a long day's honest work. I understood the quiet pride of self-reliance, of building something from nothing. But more than anything, I believed in the sanctity of a mother's love for her child, a force so powerful and pure that it could withstand any storm. It was the bedrock of my existence, the compass that had guided every decision I had ever made. Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. But all it took was 3 minutes, a single, mistaken voice message that arrived on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon to prove that bedrock was nothing but sand. It was the moment the floor of my world fell away, plunging me into a chilling darkness where every memory was tainted and every truth became a lie. The day had started with a familiar, low-grade tension that had become the new normal in my own home. Grace and Richard had moved in with me 3 months earlier. "It's just temporary, Mom," Grace had said, her voice a perfect melody of daughterly concern. "They're doing fumigation and repainting at our apartment complex, and the fumes would be terrible. Besides, this will be so nice. We can have proper family time again, just like we used to." I had been elated. My big, empty house, which had once echoed with the sounds of her childhood, would be filled with life again. I had missed our Sunday dinners, our shared laughter, the simple comfort of having my family close. But the reality was nothing like the fantasy I had painted in my mind. From the very first day they hauled their suitcases over the threshold, a subtle shift occurred. My refuge began to feel less like my own. It started with small things. Richard, complaining that my television was an ancient relic and promptly ordering a massive new one that dominated my living room. Grace, reorganizing my kitchen cabinets, declaring my old, familiar plates and pots dowdy, and replacing them with sleek, modern cookware that felt alien in my hands. My collection of framed photographs was moved from the main hallway to a shadowy corner in the guest room. "It's just to declutter, Mom," Grace had explained with a tight smile. "It makes the space feel more open." Then came the quiet conversations. I would walk into a room, and their hushed tones would instantly evaporate, replaced by a sudden, forced interest in the weather forecast or a news item on the radio. "What were you two talking about so seriously?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, nothing important, Mom," Grace would reply, her eyes avoiding mine. "Just boring adult stuff. Bills, work, you know." But the air would hum with the ghost of their unspoken words. They began to treat me with a kind of patronizing concern that grated on my nerves. "Mom, let me help you with those bills," Richard would say, plucking the envelopes from my hands before I could even open them. "At your age, you shouldn't be worrying about these tedious things." Grace started, helping me with my banking, insisting on driving me to the bank and then hovering over my shoulder as I spoke with the teller. "We just want to make sure you're not getting confused, Mom," she'd say, patting my arm. "You've been so forgetful lately." The thing was, I hadn't been forgetful. I paid my bills on time, I managed my modest budget with care, I remembered every appointment. But they said it with such conviction that I began to doubt my own mind. Was I misplacing things? Was I repeating stories? The most painful moments were the ones I overheard when they thought I was out of earshot. I was in the garden one afternoon, trimming the rose bushes my mother had planted decades ago, when I heard Richard on the patio, talking on his phone. "Yeah, we're settled in at the mother-in-law's place," he said, his voice low. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. Carol says she can have all the paperwork ready in a couple of weeks. It's just a matter of time." When I came around the corner, asking who he was talking to, he flashed me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just my boss, Margaret. A big work project. Nothing for you to worry about. Carol, Grace's cousin, who worked at the county clerk's office. She had started visiting more frequently, always with a folder tucked under her arm. I'd find them huddled at the kitchen table, the folder open, and they would snap it shut the moment I entered. Just some insurance paperwork, Aunt Margaret, Carol would say, her smile a little too bright. Grace is just helping me understand the fine print. It felt off, but I dismissed it. I didn't want to believe my own daughter could be involved in anything untoward. I was the naive old woman they thought I was, desperately clinging to the image of the family I thought we were. That Tuesday, the tension was thicker than usual. They had been whispering all morning, their faces drawn and serious. When I asked if everything was all right, Grace had given me that same tight, brittle smile. "It's nothing, Mom, just stress from Richard's work. We have to go out for a few hours, take care of some things." They left in a hurry, and the silence they left behind was heavy and ominous. I wandered through the rooms of my house, feeling like a ghost in my own life. This was the home I had built, brick by brick, with the sweat of my brow. I had worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, cleaning other people's messes for 30 years to pay for this land, for the materials, for the dream of a stable home for my daughter. Every scuff on the floor held a memory, the faint pencil marks on the doorframe charting Grace's growth from a toddler to a young woman. The small stain on the living room carpet from a spilled glass of juice during one of her birthday parties. This house was not just a structure. It was the physical manifestation of my love, my sacrifice, my entire life's work. And now it felt like a beautiful prison. Trying to calm my racing thoughts, I went to the past kitchen to make a cup of chamomile tea. The golden afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was in that deceptively peaceful moment that my phone chimed, the distinctive tone for a voice message. I picked it up and saw it was from Grace. A foolish, hopeful part of me wondered if she was checking in, if she was asking me to start dinner, if this was a sign that the daughter I knew was still in there somewhere. I pressed play. And the voice that came out was not my daughter's. It was a stranger's voice, cold, hard, and dripping, with a contempt that made my blood run cold. "Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house any more." The words landed like a physical blow to my chest, knocking the air from my lungs. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the countertop to keep myself upright. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. "She's a total nuisance, Richard." Each word was a shard of glass. "She gets into everything we do, always asking questions, always there, like a shadow we can't shake. And on top of that, we're already spending so much money on her." Spending money on me? The sheer audacious lie of it stole my breath. I was the one who had been quietly supplementing their income, giving them hundreds of dollars from my pension each month, money I believed was helping them through a tough patch. I had eaten cheap canned soup for a week so I could give Grace cash for a new dress for a work event. "I've been looking into some cheap places," her voice continued, so casual, so utterly devoid of emotion. "I found one on the outskirts that only costs $800 a month. With what we save, we can finally remodel the kitchen we want so badly and even get new furniture for the living room." I felt the room spin. The $800 was the exact amount I had been giving them. They weren't spending money on me. They were resenting the money I was giving them, seeing it as an obstacle to their desired home renovations. This was my Grace. My baby, the child I had carried and nurtured, the one I had read bedtime stories to, the one I had held through every fever and heartbreak. She was talking about me as if I were a piece of outdated furniture, an inconvenient pet that needed to be boarded somewhere cheap and out of the way. But the message, the horror was far from over. It plunged deeper into an abyss of betrayal I could never have imagined. Also, she said, and I could hear the cunning satisfaction in her tone, I've already checked all the house papers. It's in her name, but Carol already explained how we can transfer it to our name without her realizing. It's going to be about $500 in bribes and fees, but it's worth it. My cousin already has experience with these kinds of arrangements. A violent tremor ran through my body, and my phone clattered onto the tiled floor. I stared at it, lying there on the ground, as if it were a venomous snake. My house. She was calmly discussing the theft of my home. The final, brutal piece of the puzzle slammed into place. The whispered conversations, Carol's visits with her mysterious folders, the insurance paperwork, Richard's phone call, it was all part of a cold, calculated conspiracy. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were planning to steal the very roof over my head, the only security I had left in this world. I bent down, my movements slow and stiff, and retrieved the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The message kept playing. I already spoke with the director of the Street Francis home. Grace's voice continued, and the clinical coldness in it was more terrifying than any shout. I explained the situation. I told him that my mother has early-stage dementia and that it's dangerous for her to live alone. He was very understanding. He says they see cases like this all the time. I've already signed all the preliminary admission papers. My legs finally gave way. I sank to the cold kitchen floor, the tears now streaming down my face unchecked. She had lied. She had maliciously, deliberately lied about my mental state to a stranger. She had signed papers to have me institutionalized against my will, stripping me of my freedom, my autonomy, my very personhood. The fake medical evaluations, the comments about my forgetfulness, it was all a sinister campaign to build a case, to create a paper trail that would justify their monstrous plan. The plan is perfect, honey, she went on, and I could hear Richard murmuring in agreement in the background. The man I had welcomed into my family, whom I had helped financially, was a willing accomplice in this destruction. Next Tuesday, we're going to tell her she has a routine medical appointment. We'll take her to the home, check her in, and by the time she realizes what happened, she'll already be inside, and we'll have legal guardianship. Carol says that with the medical reports we got, which say she has mental confusion, it will be very easy to prove she can't make decisions on her own. And then, the sound that shattered what was left of my heart. Laughter, light, carefree laughter from my daughter, followed by Richard's chuckle. They were laughing. They were laughing about their ingenious plan to destroy my life. The best part of all, Grace continued, her voice giddy with triumph, is that she'll never suspect a thing. She thinks we're the perfect children who adore her. She still says, "Thank you for taking care of me, honey," when I bring her breakfast in bed. If she only knew that I'm giving her that breakfast to keep her calm while I prepare her funeral in life. A funeral in life. The phrase echoed in the hollowed-out cavern of my soul. She wasn't just planning to put me in a home. She was burying me alive. With the $485,000 the house is worth. Her voice turned greedy. We can pay off all our credit card debts, the car loan, and we'll even have enough left over to go to Europe on vacation like we've always wanted. And the best part is we won't have to pretend to love her anymore. No more Sundays pretending we like her horrible food. No more listening to her repetitive stories from when she was young. Every word was a fresh wound. The meals I prepared with so much love, hoping to recreate the warmth of our past. The stories I told, the memories of my youth and her childhood that I cherished and wanted to pass on to her, they were a tedious burden. It had all been a performance, a lie. In a month, Mom will be in the home and we'll own everything. Grace finished, her voice dripping with finality. We can finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us. Besides, the life insurance she has is in our name, so if something happens to her at the home, God forgive me for saying this, it wouldn't be so bad." The message ended. Silence. A silence so profound and heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me, crushing me into the cold, hard floor. I sat there, frozen, for what could have been minutes or hours. I played the message again, and again, and again, hoping, praying that my ears were deceiving me, that this was some sort of psychotic break, a terrible nightmare from which I would imminently wake, sweating and terrified but relieved. But with each repetition, the reality became more horrifyingly concrete. The woman I had loved more than my own life, the center of my universe for 35 years, saw me as a nuisance, a bitter old woman, a financial obstacle. She had calculated the value of my death and found it not so bad. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I wandered through the rooms of my house like a specter, my fingers tracing the familiar grooves and scars that told the story of our life together. The small chip in the bathroom sink from when Grace had dropped a perfume bottle as a teenager, the worn spot on the staircase where our feet had tread for decades. The view from her old bedroom window, every cherished memory, was now poisoned, every happy moment retroactively stained with the knowledge of her secret contempt. But, as the deepest, darkest part of the night began to relent, giving way to the first fragile hints of dawn, a change began to stir within me. The paralyzing grief, the soul-crushing pain, began to curdle. It transformed, hardening in the furnace of this ultimate betrayal into something new, something cold, sharp, and formidable, a pure, unyielding, and absolute determination. She thought I was a naive, helpless old woman, easily manipulated and disposed of. She had forgotten the woman who built this house from the ground up. She had underestimated the mother who fought for every single thing she had ever had. As a thin gray light filtered through the kitchen window, I pushed myself up from the floor. My body ached, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. I walked to my bedroom, to the back of my closet, and I pulled out my most elegant crimson pantsuit, the one I had worn to her college graduation. I put it on. I carefully applied my makeup. I styled my hair. I fastened my mother's pearl earrings to my ears. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, I did not see a victim. I saw a warrior. I gathered my purse, my important documents, my deed, my birth certificate, my bank books, and with a smile on my lips that held no joy but was filled with a fierce, unshakable purpose, I walked out of my front door. I had a plan that would change everything forever. And my daughter, Grace, would never, ever see it coming. To understand the depth of the betrayal, to truly feel the seismic shock that voice message sent through the very core of my being, you have to go back with me. You have to understand the world I was built in, a world where love was a verb, an action, something you did with your hands, your sweat, and your last dollar. It was a world where family was the beginning and the end of everything, and for it, you gave until it hurt, and then you gave some more. I was raised by a woman of quiet strength and endless labor, my mother, a seamstress. Our small home was perpetually filled with the sound of her machine, a steady, industrious hum that started before the sun peaked over the horizon and often continued long after the moon had taken its place. That sound was the heartbeat of our home, the rhythm of our survival. The air always carried the faint scent of fabric and thread, and the floor was often a mosaic of colorful cloth scraps. We were poor, there's no gentler way to say it. A new dress was a treasure, a piece of fruit was a luxury, and a full pantry was a victory we celebrated with silent gratitude. But what we lacked in material things, we more than made up for in a fierce, protective, and unwavering love. My mother's hands were a map of her dedication, calloused, nimble, and always moving. She could transform a simple piece of cloth into a beautiful dress, and she could transform a moment of fear into one of resilience with just a few words. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So, if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I remember sitting at her feet, watching her work, and she would look at me, her eyes tired but full of a fire that never went out. "Margaret," she'd say, her voice a low, steady melody against the machine's whir. "In this life, the only thing that truly matters, the only thing that lasts, is family. Everything else is just noise. And for family, you give everything. You work until your bones ache. You go without so they can have. You give to the very last drop of your blood if you have to. That is not a burden, Mija. That is love." Those words weren't just a lesson, they were the blueprint of my existence. They were the creed I lived by. So, when I found myself at 18, pregnant and terrified, with the boy I thought loved me vanishing into the night like a wisp of smoke, those words were my anchor. The shame was a heavy cloak I wore everywhere. The fear a constant, cold companion in my belly. I remember knocking on his parents' door, my hands trembling, my voice barely a whisper. They didn't even let me finish my sentence. The door slammed in my face, the sound final and brutal. "Our son isn't going to ruin his future for some random girl," his father spat from the other side of the wood. I stood there on the porch, the world spinning, feeling utterly and completely alone. But then, my mother found me. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't sigh with disappointment. She simply wrapped her arms around me, her familiar scent of fabric and coffee grounds enveloping me, and she held me while I cried until I had no tears left. "That child," she said, her voice firm and clear, "is going to have everything we couldn't. She is going to be raised with love and strength. We will do it together, and she will be a good woman." In that moment, she wasn't just my mother, she was my fortress. And she meant every word. A week later, she sold her only 2 gold bracelets. They were the last pieces of jewelry she had from her own mother, thin, delicate things she wore on special occasions. They were her last tangible connection to a past of her own. She sold them without a second thought and used the money to buy a crib, a pram, tiny clothes, and stacks of diapers. She never once mentioned the sacrifice. To her, it wasn't a sacrifice, it was simply what you did. When Grace was born, it was as if the sun had broken through the darkest storm clouds of my life. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, with a head full of dark hair, big, curious eyes, and a smile that could light up the entire room. She was my angel, my purpose, my reason for breathing. My mother and I fell into a new rhythm. I would wake before dawn, feed Grace, and then head out to my first cleaning job. My mother would care for her, the hum of the sewing machine now a lullaby for her granddaughter. In the afternoons, I would return, my body aching, my hands raw from harsh chemicals, and I would take over, bathing Grace, feeding her and putting her to bed with a story, while my mother went back to her sewing. We were a team, a unit, bound by our love for this tiny, perfect human. I started cleaning houses when I was 19. I earned barely $20 a day, but every single cent was for Grace. I vividly remember the first day I took her to kindergarten. We couldn't afford the bus, so we walked. It was a long walk, but her little hand was tucked securely in mine. She wore her uniform, which I had ironed to perfection the night before, and her little shoes were shined so brightly you could see your reflection in them. When we arrived, other mothers pulled up in fancy cars, dressed in clothes that cost more than I made in a month. I felt a familiar pang of inadequacy, standing there in my patched-up dress, my hands rough and calloused. But then, Grace turned to me, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed my cheek. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "You're the best in the whole world." In that moment, every sore muscle, every moment of exhaustion, every judgmental glance from the other mothers, it all melted away. It was all worth it. She was worth it. The years settled into a relentless but purposeful routine. Wake up at 4 in the morning. Prepare breakfast for Grace. Walk her to school. Work cleaning 3 different houses until 6 in the evening. Pick her up. Help her with her homework. Put her to bed with a story. On weekends, I took in laundry from neighbors to earn extra money. All of it, every single action, was for her. I wanted her to have a better life than mine. I wanted her to work in an office with air conditioning, to wear nice clothes, to never have to smell the acrid scent of bleach on her hands at the end of the day. My mother passed away when Grace was 8 years old. It was a loss that left a crater in my heart. But before she left, she made me promise her something. She was so frail in that hospital bed, her voice a thin whisper, but her eyes held the same fire. "Margaret," she said, gripping my hand with a surprising strength, "that child is your greatest treasure. You give her an education. You give her all your love, and she will take care of you when you're old. She will honor you. The blood of our family is good. She will not fail you." I held her hand and made that promise through my tears. Her words became my mantra, the fuel that kept me going on the days when the weight of it all felt too heavy to bear. When Grace turned 15, she wanted a party. Not just a small gathering, but a real, proper quinceañera. She showed me pictures from magazines of girls in beautiful gowns, of elaborate cakes and decorated halls. I saw the longing in her eyes, and I knew what I had to do. For 6 months, I worked extra days, taking on a 4th house to clean on Sundays, my only day of rest. I saved every penny, even the money I had been setting aside to finally fix our leaky roof. In the end, I spent $3,500 on that celebration. It was an astronomical sum, a fortune to me. The night of the party, when I saw Grace walk into the hall in her golden dress, her face glowing with happiness, every single sacrifice felt insignificant. She was radiant. She was a princess. She danced and laughed, and when she hugged me, her arms tight around my neck, she whispered, "Mom, I don't know how you give me so much when you have almost nothing. When I grow up, I'm going to give all this back to you, multiplied by 1,000. I held her close, my heart so full I thought it would burst. "You are my everything, Grace," I told her. "This is all for you." Throughout high school, she was an exemplary student. Her report cards were filled with the best grades. She was in school plays, and her teachers constantly told me she had a brilliant future ahead of her. But excellence, I quickly learned, came with a price. The books, the uniforms, the field trips, the materials for her projects, it all cost money I simply didn't have. So, I went back to working on Sundays, my body protesting the never-ending cycle of work, but my spirit willing because it was for her. The silence they left behind after that Tuesday morning was different from any I had known before. It wasn't the peaceful, comfortable quiet of a home at rest. It was a heavy, charged silence, thick with the echoes of their betrayal. I moved through the rooms of my house like a stranger, seeing everything with new, painfully clear eyes. The new, oversized television was no longer just an eyesore. It was a symbol of their invasion. The unfamiliar pots and pans in my kitchen were not just modern upgrades. They were replacements, erasing my history, my taste, my presence. Every object they had touched, every space they had altered, felt contaminated. I replayed the message one more time, not with the shattered heart of a mother, but with the cold, analytical mind of a strategist. I listened to Grace's words, not as a personal attack, but as a blueprint of their plan. "Next Tuesday," she had said. That gave me exactly 7 days. 7 days to dismantle the trap they had spent months constructing around me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now secondary to this new, burning resolve. They had awoken a part of me I had long forgotten, the fighter who had built this life from nothing. My first stop was the bank. I arrived the moment the doors opened at 8 a.m. The familiar, cool, polished air of the lobby was a stark contrast to the emotional chaos I had left at home. Nora, the branch manager who had known me for 15 years, looked up from her desk with a warm, professional smile. "Good morning, Miss Baker," she said. "How can we help you today?" "Nora," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I need to review all the reviews. Transactions on my primary savings and checking accounts for the last 6 months. I also need to change all my beneficiaries immediately, and I need to know if anyone has attempted to access my account information without my explicit written authorization." Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of professional concern. "Is everything all right, Margaret?" "I'm not sure," I replied, holding her gaze. "That's what I need you to help me find out." She nodded and turned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Her frown deepened as she scrolled. "Miss Baker," she said slowly, "I do see several inquiries registered here, made by your daughter, Grace." She presented a letter, signed by you, authorizing her to review your statements and account details to, and I quote, "assist with financial management due to ongoing medical concerns." My blood ran cold, but my voice remained calm. "Nora, I never signed that letter. May I see it, please?" She pulled a scanned document from the system. The moment I saw it, a fresh wave of anger, clean and sharp, washed over me. The signature was a good forgery, similar to my own flowing script, but it was wrong. The slant was slightly off, the tail of the G a little too dramatic. I had always signed my name with a quiet confidence. This signature had a frantic, greedy flourish. "This is a forgery," I stated, placing my driver's license on the counter so she could compare the signatures. "My daughter has been fraudulently accessing my financial information. I need you to cancel any and all authorizations she has immediately and place a high-priority security alert on all of my accounts. No information is to be given to anyone but me, in person, with photo ID." Nora's face paled. "Miss Baker, this is very serious." "We will, of course, comply immediately. I must also recommend you file a formal report for fraud." "That is my next step," I assured her. "But first, I need to secure my assets. I want to transfer the entirety of my savings, all $8,750 into a new, high-security account that only I can access. And I want to change the beneficiary on my life insurance policy." For the next hour, under Nora's guidance, I systematically took back control. I watched as the money I had scrimped and saved for a lifetime was moved to a new account with a new number and new complex passwords that existed only in my mind. Then, I changed the beneficiary of my life insurance. Grace would no longer profit from my death. I named the Golden Hope Foundation, a charity for abandoned seniors, as the new recipient. It felt like a righteous act, a promise to myself that some good would come from this ugliness. My next stop was the county clerk's office. I walked in with my head held high, my small purse clutched in my hand, a tiny digital recorder inside it, silently capturing everything. I found Carol at her desk, looking perfectly officious in her cubicle. "Good morning, Carol," I said, my voice sweet and grandmotherly. She jumped, her eyes widening in sheer panic. She quickly tried to close a folder on her desk, but not before I saw my name at the top of a document. "Aunt Margaret, what are you doing here? Grace didn't tell me you were coming." "Oh, don't worry, dear," I said, maintaining my pleasant facade. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Grace mentioned you've been such a help with some paperwork for me. I just wanted to better understand it all. Could you explain exactly what documents you need with my name on them?" This old mind gets so confused with all this legal jargon. Carol was sweating. I could see a fine sheen on her upper lip. Her hands fluttered nervously over her keyboard. Well, Aunt, it's just routine updates for the property registry. You know, making sure everything is current. Carol, I said, leaning forward slightly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though my eyes were hard. No. Her face went slack with fear. Know what? I know about the plan. I know about the forged documents. I know you've been using your position here to help my daughter steal my house. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, though I didn't play the audio. I have proof of everything. Right here. All the color drained from her face. She looked like a cornered animal. Aunt Margaret, I didn't want to. Grace told me you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. She said it was for your own good. She pressured me. It was for money, Carol, I said, my voice firm and cold, all pretense of sweetness gone. Let's not pretend it was for my good. Now, you have two options. You can help me reverse every single fraudulent document you've created, and then you can resign from this position you've so clearly abused. Or I can walk straight to your supervisor right now and present this evidence that you have been conspiring to commit fraud and forge official documents. Which will it be? She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Please, you can't. I have 3 kids. I can't lose my job. Please. Then help me fix this, I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. And if you do, I will not press criminal charges against you. Over the next 2 hours, through tears and trembling hands, Carol showed me everything. She pulled up digital files and printed copies of the forged property transfer documents, the fake medical reports from a doctor she and Grace had bribed, the preliminary guardianship papers. She confessed to every detail, and my hidden recorder captured it all. I made her give me signed and notarized copies of everything. It was a damning, irrefutable paper trail, not of my incompetence, but of their criminal conspiracy. With my finances secured and a confession from their accomplice in my purse, I made my final stop of the day, the offices of Harrison Ford, attorney at law. He was the most respected litigator in the city, known for being both brilliant and ruthlessly ethical. I was shown into his spacious, wood-paneled office, and I placed a thick folder of evidence on his desk. Attorney Ford, I said, my voice calm and clear, my name is Margaret Baker. I need your help to stop a fraud and protect my rights. He spent nearly an hour reviewing the documents in silence, the bank forgeries, Carol's confession, the fraudulent medical reports. Finally, he looked up, his expression a mixture of professional interest and personal disgust. Miss Baker, he said, this is one of the most egregious cases of familial fraud I have ever seen. We have more than enough evidence to press significant criminal charges. But before we proceed, I need to understand your goal. What is it you want to achieve? I met his gaze without flinching. I want justice, attorney. But more than that, I want my daughter to learn that actions have consequences. For 66 years, I have been too good, too generous, too understanding. I confused sacrifice with love, and I allowed myself to be used. It's time for someone to defend me, even if that someone has to be me. A slow, admiring smile spread across his face. Miss Baker, it will be an honor to represent you. We are going to prepare a legal strategy that protects all of your rights and sends a very, very clear message about the consequences of trying to defraud a senior citizen. For the next several hours, we worked. We drafted a civil lawsuit for fraud, falsification of documents, and attempted illegal appropriation of property. We prepared a criminal complaint naming Grace, Richard, and Carol as co-conspirators. Attorney Ford explained the process, the likely outcomes, and the power of the evidence we possessed. By the time I left his office, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows, but I felt illuminated from within by a new, unshakable strength. I returned home as evening fell. The house was lit up, and I could see the flickering blue light of their massive television through the window. I took a deep, steadying breath, smoothing the front of my crimson suit. The performance was not over yet. I had to play my part for a little while longer. When I walked in, they were on the sofa just as I had left them. Grace looked up, that same fake, placating smile already on her face. "Hi, Mom. How were your errands?" "Very productive, honey," I replied, my voice perfectly calm. I hung up my coat and walked into the living room, sitting in my favorite armchair, the one Richard had recently taken to claiming as his own. I looked at them, my gaze steady. "By the way, some people will be coming to visit us tomorrow morning. I hope you'll both be here to receive them." Richard muted the television. "What people, Mom?" he asked, his curiosity laced with a hint of suspicion. I gave them a small, mysterious smile. "Oh, you'll see. They are people who are going to help us clarify some very important things about our family's future." The silence that followed was brittle. I saw a flicker of unease pass between them, a quick, nervous glance. They had no idea. They were so confident in their control, so sure of their helpless, naive Margaret. They had no inkling of the storm that was scheduled to arrive at our doorstep at 10 o'clock the next morning. We ate dinner in near silence, the only sounds the clinking of cutlery against the new plates Grace had bought. I ate with a quiet appetite, my mind already focused on the confrontation to come. For the first time in months, I felt no anxiety, no need to fill the silence with chatter. The power had shifted. I knew it, and some deep, primal part of them must have sensed it too. That night I went to bed and slept a deep, dreamless, and profoundly peaceful sleep. The wheels of justice were in motion, and for the first time since they had moved in, I was no longer the victim in my own story. I was the architect of its final chapter. The morning of the reckoning dawned clear and bright. I woke at my usual time, a sense of profound calm settled deep within my bones. There was no more anxiety, no more dread. The waiting was over. Today, the masks would come off, and the truth would stand bare in the unforgiving light of day. I dressed with deliberate care, once again choosing the crimson suit. It was my armor, my uniform for the battle ahead. I took my time with my makeup, applying it with a steady hand, and styled my hair into its most elegant twist. I looked every bit the dignified, capable woman I was, not the confused, feeble-minded invalid they had tried to paint me as. Downstairs, Grace and Richard were already in the kitchen. The air was thick with a forced normalcy. Grace was scrambling eggs, and Richard was scrolling through his phone, but I could feel the tension radiating from them. They were nervous. My mysterious announcement about visitors had unsettled them. "Good morning," I said, my voice even and pleasant. Grace turned, her smile tight. "Morning, Mom. You're up early. Big plans today." Her tone was light, but her eyes were searching, trying to read me. "Indeed," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Today is a very important day." I sat at the table, sipping my coffee, and said nothing more. The silence stretched, becoming heavy and uncomfortable. They exchanged another one of those looks, a silent communication of shared unease. They tried to make small talk, asking about the weather, about a television show, but I merely smiled and gave non-committal answers. The power was mine, and I let them feel the weight of it. As the clock on the wall ticked closer to 10, I could see their restlessness growing. Richard checked his watch repeatedly. Grace started nervously wiping down counters that were already clean. Then, at exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell chimed, its sound echoing through the tense silence of the house. "I'll get it," I said, rising smoothly before either of them could move. I walked to the door, my posture straight, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. I opened it to reveal Attorney Ford, looking impeccably professional in a dark suit, flanked by two uniformed police officers. A public notary stood slightly behind them, a leather portfolio in her hands. "Good morning, Miss Baker," Attorney Ford said, his voice formal and carrying perfectly into the house. "Right on time, Attorney Ford," I replied, stepping back to allow them entry. "Please, come in." As the four of them filed into my living room, Grace and Richard shot up from the kitchen table. Their faces were a comical canvas of confusion and dawning alarm. "Mom, what's going on?" Grace demanded, her voice shrill. "Who are these people?" Richard stepped forward, his body tense. "Yeah, what is this?" "Sit down," I commanded, my voice ringing with an authority they had never heard from me before. It was not a request, it was an order. Stunned, they slowly sank onto the sofa. The two police officers took up positions near the door, their presence adding an unspoken, serious gravity to the room. Attorney Ford cleared his throat. "Miss Grace, Mr. Richard, I am Attorney Harrison Ford. I am here representing your mother, Miss Margaret Baker. We are here today to inform you that we have discovered irrefutable evidence of multiple criminal activities you have perpetrated against her, including fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted illegal appropriation of property." The color drained from their faces so completely it was as if they had been bleached. "What are you talking about?" Grace stammered, her eyes wide with panic. "This is insane. We would never do anything to hurt my mother." "Wouldn't you?" I asked quietly. "I took my phone from my purse." "Grace, would you like me to play for everyone the voice message you accidentally sent me last Tuesday?" In that moment, I saw true, unadulterated terror dawn in my daughter's eyes. It was the look of someone watching their perfectly constructed world explode. In an instant, she realized her catastrophic mistake. Her own carelessness had been their undoing. "No," she shrieked, lunging from the couch toward me. "That's private. You have no right." One of the officers moved swiftly, blocking her path. "Ma'am, I need you to remain seated." "Relax, honey," I said, my voice cold as ice. "This is just getting started. Sit down and listen to everything you planned for your mother." I pressed play. My daughter's voice, filled with contempt, filled the room she had planned to steal. "Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. She's a total nuisance. She gets into everything we do. I've been looking into some cheap places. I found one that only costs $800 a month." I watched their faces as my voice, the one they had mocked, detailed their scheme. Grace had her face in her hands, but her shoulders were shaking. Richard was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. The audio continued. "Also, I've already checked all the house papers. It's in her name, but Carol already explained how we can transfer it to our name without her realizing." Richard stood up abruptly. "This is a setup," he yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Attorney Ford. "You're manipulating her. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing." Attorney Ford gave a small, professional smile. "Mr. Richard, we haven't even gotten to the most compelling evidence yet." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. "This is the signed and notarized confession of Carol Rodriguez, your cousin, detailing your entire conspiracy." Grace's head snapped up. "Carol is a liar." She screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "She's making all that up to save herself." "Oh, really?" I asked. I took the small recorder from my purse. "Because I also have the complete conversation I had with Carol in her office, where she confessed to everything in tears." I pressed play. Carol's voice, thick with tears, filled the room. Grace told me you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. She showed me how to forge your signature. She promised me she would pay me $2,000 once she had the house. Richard sank back onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. This is a nightmare, he mumbled. It's all gotten out of control. No, Richard, I said firmly. This is justice. What was a nightmare was living in my own house, feeling like a prisoner, listening to you talk about me as if I were a burden, watching you plan to steal everything I've worked for my entire life. Attorney Ford continued, methodically and mercilessly laying out the evidence. He presented the forged bank authorization, side by side with my real signature. He showed the fraudulent medical reports from the corrupt doctor, and then presented the official results of the independent psychological evaluation I had voluntarily undergone, which declared me to be in perfect mental health. Mom, please, Grace begged, turning to me, her face streaked with tears. But these were not tears of remorse. They were tears of desperation, of a plan imploding. We were just trying to take care of you. We thought it was for the best. Take care of me, I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. By stealing my house? By lying about my sanity? By planning to have me locked away against my will? I stood up and walked toward her. In that message, Grace, you said you hoped I would die soon, so you could collect my life insurance. I never said that, she screamed. I rewound the audio to the precise moment and played it. Her voice was chillingly clear. Besides, the life insurance she has is in our name, so if something happens to her at the home, God forgive me for saying this, it wouldn't be so bad. The silence that followed was absolute and devastating. Even the police officers exchanged looks of pure disgust. The silence after they were taken away was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. It echoed with the ghost of Grace's screams, the phantom click of the handcuffs, the memory of Richard's hate-filled whisper. I stood in the center of my living room, the space that had just been a courtroom, and felt the adrenaline drain from my body, leaving me cold and trembling. The crimson suit, my armor, now felt like a costume for a role I never wanted to play. I had done it. I had exposed them, confronted them, and had them arrested. I had won a decisive, legal victory. So why did I feel so utterly defeated? I spent the rest of that day in a numb haze. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sit still. I wandered from room to room, the emptiness of the house pressing in on me. Every corner held a memory, but now those memories were double exposed with the fresh, searing images of their betrayal. The sofa where Richard had lounged was now the spot where he had been handcuffed. The kitchen table where we had shared meals was now the place where I had presented my evidence. My home was both a sanctuary and a crime scene, and I didn't know how to reconcile the two. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grace's face, the terror in her eyes as the officer approached her. I heard her voice, not the cold one from the message, but the broken, pleading one from our confrontation. I'm your daughter. The words were a mantra of guilt, chipping away at my resolve. Had I been too harsh? Had I overreacted? Was there another way? The questions swarmed in the darkness, stinging and persistent. A mother's heart is a stubborn organ, conditioned to forgive, to protect, to make excuses. It fought a fierce, internal battle against the cold, hard facts my mind knew to be true. The first crack in my newfound strength appeared just after dawn. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hoping it was Attorney Ford with an update, I answered. Hello? A woman's voice, sharp and venomous, spat into my ear. You're a miserable old witch. How dare you do that to your own flesh and blood? I hope you die alone and forgotten. The line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. It was just a random stranger, I told myself. A troll. But the hatred in that voice was so personal, so specific. My hand was shaking as I set the phone down. It rang again almost immediately. Another unknown number. This time a man's voice. "You should be ashamed of yourself, you unnatural mother." Click. This was not random. This was coordinated. By mid-morning, the phone was ringing non-stop. Insults, threats, curses, they came in waves. I finally turned the ringer off, but my cell phone started buzzing with text messages from numbers I didn't recognize, all variations on the same theme. I was a monster, a failed mother, a greedy old woman, destroying her family. Then, my neighbor and lifelong friend, Miss Rose, was at my door, her face etched with worry. "Margaret, honey, are you all right?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I saw the police yesterday. And then, well, I was on the community Facebook page this morning." Her voice trailed off, her expression pained. "What is it, Rose?" I asked, my stomach clenching. She showed me her phone. There, in a local community group with thousands of members, was a post from an account named Concerned Daughter. It was Grace's profile picture, but the account was fake. "I am heartbroken to share that my mother, Margaret Baker, is suffering from severe senile dementia," the post began. "In her confusion, she has falsely accused my husband and me of terrible things, leading to our wrongful arrest yesterday. She is not in her right mind and is a danger to herself. If anyone in the community sees her out alone, please contact me immediately. She needs constant supervision and should not be wandering the streets. I fear for her safety." The post was accompanied by photos of me, candid shots taken without my knowledge. In one, I was looking down at my grocery list, my brow furrowed in concentration. The caption read, "Mom, confused and disoriented at the store." In another, I was sitting on my porch, simply enjoying the sunset, looking tired after a long day. The caption, "She often sits for hours, not knowing where she is." They had crafted a narrative, using slices of my normal life, and twisted them into proof of my incompetence. The comments below were a torrent of outrage and pity. "Poor woman, how terrible for the family. This is so sad. Those poor children, trying to care for her. She looks so lost, they should have someone with her at all times." I felt the blood drain from my face. I was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion, based on a complete and utter lie. My reputation, my good name in this community I had lived in for decades, was being systematically destroyed. "Margaret, is any of this true?" Rose asked, her eyes full of concern and confusion. "No, Rose," I said, my voice trembling with a fresh wave of fury. "Not a word of it. It's all a lie." I led her to the kitchen table and showed her the folder. I didn't play the audio, it was too painful, but I showed her Carol's confession, the bank forgeries, the independent medical report declaring me sane. I watched as her expression shifted from doubt to shock, and then to a deep, righteous anger. Those monsters," she whispered, her hand over her mouth. "How could they, after all you've done?" "That's what I'm trying to understand," I replied, my voice heavy. Rose became my first ally. She left my house and immediately went on the warpath, commenting on the Facebook post, defending me, telling people they were being deceived. But it was like trying to put out a wildfire with a teacup. The smear campaign was just beginning. The next day, a woman showed up at my door, clutching a clipboard and wearing a sympathetic smile. "Hello, I'm from Adult Protective Services. We've received several reports concerning your welfare and mental state. May I come in to do a wellness check?" My heart sank. This was their next move. They were using the system, the very system designed to protect people like me, to further their campaign and build a false case. I let her in. I answered her questions with calm, lucid clarity. I showed her my clean, well-kept home, my organized bills, my fully stocked refrigerator. I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. I was not the confused, neglected woman the reports had described. "Who made these reports?" I asked. "I'm afraid that information is confidential," she said. But her tone was apologetic. She could see the disconnect. After she left, I felt violated. My privacy, my dignity, was being invaded by strangers based on the malicious lies of my own child. The harassment escalated. Anonymous letters started arriving in my mailbox, typed or written in block letters to disguise the handwriting. "You raised a daughter who hates you. Think about what you did wrong. You worked as a servant your whole life. And for what? For your daughter to despise you. You were a fool. No one will miss you when you die." The letters were calculated to shatter my self-esteem, to make me question every life choice I had ever made. They attacked the very core of who I was, a mother and a hard worker. And in my most vulnerable moments, in the deep silence of the night, they succeeded. The poison seeped in. One evening, after a particularly vicious letter that detailed all my failings as a mother, I broke down completely. I sank to the kitchen floor, the same spot where I had first heard the message, and I sobbed. Great, heaving sobs that racked my entire body. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the legal battle, the public shaming, the loneliness felt crushing. What had I done wrong? Where had I failed? Had my love been too smothering? My sacrifices too expectation-laden? In my despair, I actually considered it. Maybe I was a burden. Maybe I was insufferable. Maybe I should just drop the charges, forgive them, and try to salvage whatever broken pieces were left of our family. Trembling, I picked up the phone to call Attorney Ford. I was going to tell him I couldn't do it anymore. I was going to surrender, but as my finger hovered over the dial button, my eyes fell on the small carved wooden chest on my bookshelf. It held my most precious memories. With a sense of finality, I walked over and opened it. I pushed aside Grace's baby bracelet, her first lost tooth, her graduation tassel, until I found what I was looking for. It was a letter, the paper yellowed and fragile, folded carefully. My mother's handwriting, shaky from the illness that was taking her from me, covered the page. "My dearest Margaret," it began. "If you are reading this, it is because I am no longer with you. But I want you to know that I am so very proud of the woman and mother you have become. You are raising Grace with so much love and dedication that I am sure she will be a good woman who will honor you for life." Tears streamed down my face as I read her words, a direct message from the past. "But if things ever get difficult," she continued, "if someone tries to hurt you or take advantage of your good heart, remember that you are stronger than you think. Do not allow anyone, not even your own daughter, to trample on your dignity. True love never seeks to destroy, never seeks to steal, never seeks to humiliate." It was as if she were sitting right beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her voice clear in my ear. She had known. She had known that my kindness could be my weakness. "Margaret, you deserve respect. You deserve genuine love. You deserve to live your final years in peace and dignity. If someone cannot give you that, then they do not deserve to have you in their life, no matter how much blood you share with them." I held the letter to my chest, the sobs subsiding, replaced by a profound, steadying calm. My mother was right. This was not love. What Grace was doing was not born of love. It was born of greed and entitlement. True love does not orchestrate smear campaigns. It does not wish for your death for financial gain. I put the letter back in the chest and closed the lid. I picked up the phone again, but this time my hand was steady. "Attorney Ford," I said when he answered. "I'm calling to tell you that I want to proceed with all charges. I am not dropping anything. I want this case to go all the way." There was a pause on the other end. "I'm glad to hear that, Miss Baker," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice, "because I have news. They are desperate. They've made an offer for an out-of-court settlement. They want to avoid a public trial at all costs. A settlement, a quiet, private end, no more public spectacle, no more dragging our name through the mud." It was tempting, so tempting. "What are the terms?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "They are willing to return all the money they stole, pay additional damages, and sign a legally binding agreement to never contact you again. In exchange, you drop the criminal charges." I thought about it. I would get my money, I would be free of them, but they would walk away. There would be no public record of their crime, no true accountability. They could slink away and start over, while I would always be the woman whose daughter was arrested, with the cloud of their lies still hanging over my head in the community. "No," I said, the word feeling powerful as it left my lips. "I have a different condition." "I'm listening," Attorney Ford replied. "I will accept the financial settlement," I said. "But I also want a full written and signed confession from both of them. I want them to publicly admit, in writing, that I am mentally competent and that they fabricated the entire story about my dementia to justify their attempt to steal my house and my freedom. And I want that confession published as a public post in the same online groups where they defamed me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Attorney Ford let out a low, appreciative whistle. "Miss Baker, that is. Brilliant. That will not only clear your name completely, but it will also prevent them from ever pulling a stunt like this again. It will follow them forever." "Exactly," I said, a grim smile touching my lips for the first time in days. The fight was back in me. They had launched their onslaught, and I had wavered, but I was not broken. I was ready to counterattack. This was no longer just about justice, it was about reclaiming my truth. The week that followed my decision was a masterclass in legal strategy, a quiet, methodical counteroffensive that unfolded in wood-paneled offices and through formal correspondence, far from the public hysteria they had tried to create. Attorney Ford was a maestro, and I was his determined pupil. Learning that the most satisfying revenge was not born of screaming matches or petty acts, but of cold, hard, undeniable truth, meticulously documented and legally enforced. Their lawyer, a harried-looking man named Mr. Driscoll, had initially balked at my terms. "A public confession is outrageous," he had sputtered during a conference call with Attorney Ford. "It's professionally and socially ruinous. Your clients should have considered that," Attorney Ford replied, his voice like polished steel, before they embarked on a campaign of fraud, forgery, and defamation. "My client's terms are not negotiable. She has the option of a very public, very damning criminal trial, which I can assure you we are fully prepared to win. This settlement is a mercy." The silence on their end of the line was palpable. They were trapped, and they knew it. The evidence was a perfect, airtight box, and they were locked inside. A trial would mean subpoenas, testifying under oath. And all the sordid details of their plot, the voice message, the forged signatures, the bribed doctor, Carol's confession being splashed across the local news. A quiet settlement with a public confession was, ironically, their least humiliating option. They signed. The day the agreement was executed in Attorney Ford's office, I did not attend. I had no desire to see them. Instead, I sat in my living room, waiting for the email from my attorney. When it arrived, attached were 2 documents. The first was the financial settlement. They had returned the $8,750 they had stolen and paid an additional $15,000 in damages. Seeing the confirmation of the transfer into my new, secure account was satisfying. a tangible reclamation of what was mine, but it was the second document that truly mattered. It was titled, Full and Binding Confession and Retraction. The language was dry and legal, but the meaning was crystal clear. We, Grace Baker and Richard Williams, hereby provide this full and binding confession under the terms of our legal settlement with Margaret Baker. We admit, unequivocally, to the following. 1. We knowingly and deliberately plan to defraud Margaret Baker of her property located at my address. 2. We conspired with Carol Rodriguez to create and file forged documents to facilitate the illegal transfer of said property. 3. We knowingly provided false information to financial institutions to gain unauthorized access to Margaret Baker's accounts. 4. We knowingly and deliberately falsified medical reports and provided false testimony to medical professionals and others, claiming Margaret Baker suffered from dementia and was mentally incompetent, with the intent to have her declared unfit and institutionalized against her will. 5. We publicly defamed Margaret Baker on social media and to members of our community, knowingly spreading lies about her mental state. We affirm that Margaret Baker is, and has always been, of sound mind, fully capable of managing her own affairs, and is a victim of our criminal actions. We retract all previous statements to the contrary. We apologize for the harm and distress we have caused. It was signed by both of them, their signatures a stark admission of guilt. I printed it out and held the paper in my hands. It felt like a trophy, not of a battle won, but of my dignity restored. This single piece of paper was the key that would unlock the prison of lies they had built around me. As per the agreement, a copy of this confession was sent to the administrators of every local community forum and Facebook group where Grace had posted her defamatory stories. Within hours, the digital landscape shifted. The posts filled with pity for the poor, confused children were now replaced with this stunning legal document. The comments section erupted anew, but this time, the outrage was directed at the right people. I can't believe it! They were trying to steal from their own mother. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever read. Poor Margaret. They belong in jail. A confession isn't enough. We owe Margaret Baker a massive apology. The phone calls and anonymous letters stopped. The fake social workers and concerned strangers ceased their visits. The smear campaign was not just neutralized, it was utterly annihilated, reversed by the very weapon they had tried to use against me. The truth, it turned out, was an even more powerful virus than lies. But my quiet, legal revenge did not end there. While preparing our case, Attorney Ford's meticulous team had dug deeper into Grace and Richard's affairs. Desperate people, it seemed, were often sloppy in more ways than one. Miss Baker, Attorney Ford said during one of our meetings, a faint smile playing on his lips. My team has uncovered some interesting discrepancies. It appears that while your daughter and son-in-law were reporting a modest income on their tax returns for the last 3 years, their lifestyle, the new car, the frequent dinners out, the expensive electronics suggested a significantly higher cash flow. We discovered Richard has been working substantial, unreported side jobs in construction, paid in cash, and Grace has been running a moderately successful online boutique, also undeclared. He slid a folder across his desk. It was filled with bank statements, screenshots of online sales, and statements from individuals who had paid Richard under the table. As a law-abiding citizen, I said, meeting his gaze, I believe we have a duty to report suspected tax evasion to the appropriate authorities. We all must contribute our fair share, don't you think? Indeed, he agreed. I will see that the IRS receives a comprehensive, anonymous package. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine my newly loyal neighbor, Miss Rose, was a wonderful source of information that Grace and Richard had been served with an audit notice. The IRS, unlike a forgiving mother, was not open to negotiation or emotional appeals. They discovered a tax debt of $22,000, which with penalties and interest ballooned to over $35,000. Without the prospect of my house to bail them out, they were financially crippled. They had to sell their new car, pawn what little jewelry they had left, and take out a high-interest loan to avoid prosecution. The very financial desperation they had used to justify their betrayal was now exponentially worse, a pit of their own digging. The final, and in some ways most satisfying, part of my revenge was watching the natural consequences of their actions unfold in their personal and professional lives. The public confession had made them pariahs. Richard's sister, whom I had always liked, publicly disowned him. How could you do this to the woman who treated you like a son? She was heard screaming at him in their front yard, a scene witnessed by several neighbors. At Grace's prestigious company, reputation was currency. Her boss called her into his office. "Grace, we've seen the news," he said, his voice cold. "Our corporate clients value integrity above all else. We cannot have a senior account manager involved in a public scandal of this nature." She wasn't fired, but she was demoted to a dead-end data entry position, her career trajectory halted indefinitely. Richard faced a similar professional freeze. The factory where he worked was a place where gossip traveled fast. His supervisor, a no-nonsense man, pulled him aside. "A man who would steal from his own family," he said bluntly, "is a man I can't trust with company resources or a promotion." The promotion he had been counting on was given to someone else. Their social life evaporated. The friends they had entertained with money they stole from me now crossed the street to avoid them. They were a cautionary tale, the couple who had tried to grift an old lady and had been outsmarted by her. The shame was a shroud they could not remove. I, on the other hand, felt a weight lift from my shoulders with every piece of news. I had not acted out of malice. I had not spread lies or destroyed their property. I had simply defended myself with the truth and allowed the legal and social systems to deliver the consequences they had so richly earned. There was a profound, clean justice in it. One afternoon, about a month after the settlement, I was working in my garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A woman got out, her face familiar. It took me a moment to place her Letitia, the friend Grace had lied to about me wanting to go for a walk at 10 p.m. "Margaret," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I saw the confession. I am so sorry. I believed her. I looked at you with pity, and I should have known better. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at her, this woman who had been unwittingly used as a tool in my daughter's scheme. The anger I might have felt had been burned away in the crucible of the past few months. "There's nothing to forgive, Letitia," I said, and I meant it. "You were deceived by someone you trusted. We all were. I invited her in for tea, and we talked for a long time. It was the first of many small reconciliations, the first thread in the slow mending of my place in the community." As I waved goodbye to Letitia, I stood on my porch and looked out at the quiet street. The war was over. I had not just survived, I had prevailed. I had reclaimed my money, my reputation, my home, and most importantly, my peace. The art of my revenge was not in destruction, but in reconstruction, the careful, deliberate rebuilding of my own life on my own terms. And I knew, with a deep, unshakable certainty, that the next chapter would be mine to write, free from the shadows of betrayal. With the legal battles over and the public confession serving as a scorched earth policy on the lies that had plagued me, a strange, new quiet settled over my life. It was no longer the heavy, ominous silence of betrayal, but a spacious, clean quiet full of possibility. The house, however, no longer felt like a home. It was a monument to a life that was over, its every room a gallery of painful memories. The ghost of Grace's laughter now had a cruel echo, and the shadow of Richard's presence lingered in the chair he had claimed as his own. I had won the war, but I was still living on the battlefield. I knew, with a certainty that went straight to my bones, that I needed to leave. The decision to sell the house was the first truly selfish, and therefore liberating, choice I had made in decades. This wasn't for Grace or for anyone else, this was for me. I called a realtor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Brenda, who didn't traffic in false sentimentality. "It's a good property, Margaret," she said, looking around with a professional eye. "Solid, well-maintained. We'll have no trouble finding a buyer." She didn't ask why I was selling, and I didn't offer. It was a business transaction, clean and simple, and I relished the feeling. While the for sale sign went up in the front yard, I embarked on a parallel mission to rewrite the final chapter of my legacy. I summoned Attorney Ford back to my home, not for a battle but for a blessing. "Attorney," I said, spreading the blueprints of my new will across the kitchen table, the same table where so much of the conspiracy had been planned. "I want to make some changes." He listened, pen in hand, as I dictated my final wishes. All my assets, the proceeds from the sale of this house, my savings, the settlement money, everything, totaling nearly $500,000, were to be donated to the Golden Hope Foundation, the charity for abandoned seniors I had named as my life insurance beneficiary. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Miss Baker?" he asked, his tone respectful but cautious. "It is a considerable estate. You have other, more distant relatives." "I am completely sure," I replied, my voice firm. "I want this money to help people who have truly no need, not entitled children who see their parents as a financial portfolio. I want it to fund hot meals, legal aid, companionship, real care, not the poisonous imitation I was offered." I also included a powerful no-contest clause, stipulating that if Grace so much as filed a motion to challenge the will, she would automatically forfeit any claim, right down to the last penny. I was building a legal fortress around my final act of generosity, ensuring it could not be plundered. With my future secured, I turned to finding my new present. I didn't want another house with its burden of maintenance and memories. I wanted a home that was mine alone, a space that reflected the woman I had become, not the mother I had been. I found it in a beautiful, modern complex for active seniors called The Gardens. It was a community of low-rise apartments surrounded by walking paths, flower beds, and a sparkling communal pool. When I walked into the unit for the first time, a bright, airy two-bedroom with a balcony overlooking a central courtyard, I felt it immediately. This was not a place of sacrifice. This was a place of peace. I bought it outright for $85,000. Using the remaining money from the house sale and the legal settlement, I had more than enough to live comfortably, even luxuriously, for the rest of my days. The act of furnishing it was a revelation. I chose a sleek, comfortable sofa in a color Grace would have called too bold. I bought abstract art that spoke to me, not traditional landscapes meant to blend in. Every choice, from the coffee maker to the towels, was a declaration of independence. This was my sanctuary. Moving day was a catharsis. As the movers carefully packed the few pieces of furniture and boxes of personal items I had chosen to keep, I walked through the empty rooms of my old house for the last time. I said a quiet goodbye to the ghost of the little girl who had once lived there. I forgave the young mother who had tried her best, and I left the betrayed woman right there on the cold, empty floor. She no longer had a place in my life. Settling into the Gardens was like learning to breathe a new, cleaner kind of air. The first person to welcome me was my next-door neighbor, Nora, a spry 72-year-old widow with a mischievous glint in her eye and a seemingly endless supply of energy. "Ready for our dance class today, Margaret?" she had asked on my second morning, popping her head over my balcony. I had laughed, a real, unforced sound that surprised me. "Dance class? Nora, these old bones haven't danced in 30 years. All the more reason to start," she declared. "Come on, it's fun. And the instructor, Marco, is a dream." To my own astonishment, I went. And I loved it. The music, the movement, the sheer silliness of a room full of seniors trying to remember the steps to a salsa, it was joyful. It was life-affirming. It was for no one's pleasure but our own. This became the pattern of my new life. I enrolled in a painting class at the local community center and discovered a latent talent for watercolor landscapes. The quiet focus of mixing colors and capturing light on paper was a form of meditation. My instructor, a gentleman named Arthur, told me my paintings had a quiet strength. I hung them on the walls of my new apartment, a gallery of my own making. But the most significant part of my new foundation was the work I began at the Golden Hope Foundation. Now that it was my chosen beneficiary, I felt a personal connection. I started volunteering 3 days a week. I didn't just stuff envelopes, I sat with people. I listened to their stories. I met Carmen, an 81-year-old woman whose children had evicted her from her own home after draining her bank accounts. I met Robert, a 75-year-old man whose son had used a forged power of attorney to sell his classic car collection, his pride and joy. They saw in me not just a volunteer, but a survivor. My story became a beacon for them. "Margaret," Robert asked me one afternoon, his voice heavy with despair, "how did you find the strength to fight? How did you forgive?" I thought carefully before answering. "Robert, I didn't find the strength," I said. "I built it, brick by brick, just like I built my first house." And as for forgiving isn't for them. It's for you. It's letting go of the poison so you can heal. But forgiveness doesn't mean giving them a key to your new house. It means changing the locks and living well in spite of them. My work there gave me a purpose I had never known. Using the knowledge I had gained from my own legal ordeal, I helped the Foundation's legal team identify patterns of fraud. We helped recover stolen funds for 47 seniors. We reversed fraudulent competency declarations for 23 others. We found safe, affordable housing for 15 more. I had traded the toxic dynamics of a single, broken family for the nourishing community of 100 grateful souls. One evening, about 6 months after I had moved, I was sitting on my balcony, sketching the sunset, when a profound sense of contentment washed over me. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was surrounded by a community I had chosen, engaged in work that mattered, and exploring passions I never knew I had. The legacy of sacrifice I had inherited from my mother had been fulfilled, and in its place, I was building a new legacy of self-respect and joyful independence. The foundation was no longer just a name in my will, it was the cornerstone of my new life. And I knew, as I watched the sky turn from orange to deep purple, that the bitter old woman my daughter had described in that audio message was truly gone. In her place was a woman being remade, stronger, wiser, and finally, completely and gloriously free. The new foundation was laid, and it was solid. Now, it was time to build upward. Peace, I was learning, was not a static state to be achieved, but a garden that required constant tending. I tended to mine with painting classes, volunteer work, and long, leisurely coffees on my balcony with Nora. The soil was rich, and for the first time in years, I felt myself truly beginning to bloom. But gardens, no matter how well tended, are not immune to the weeds that blow in on the wind from neglected yards nearby. The first weed appeared as a piece of gossip, delivered by my old neighbor, Miss Rose, during one of her weekly visits to my new apartment. She loved the bright, modern space, always commenting on how it suited me. "You look 10 years younger, Margaret," she said, settling onto my bold, turquoise sofa with a cup of tea. "It's like the weight of the world has been lifted off you." "It has, Rose. It truly has." She sipped her tea, her expression shifting to a more conspiratorial tone. "Well, the same can't be said for those two. It's all falling apart over there." I didn't need to ask who those two were. A familiar, cold knot tightened in my stomach, a relic of old battles. I said nothing, simply waited. "They had to sell the car, you know," she continued, her voice a low whisper, as if the walls themselves might be scandalized. "That fancy new one. And they've moved into a tiny apartment on the south side, the one above the laundromat. The noise is dreadful, I hear." I remained silent, focusing on the warmth of the teacup in my hands. This was not my concern. Their consequences were their own to manage. "But that's not the worst of it." Rose leaned in closer. "The fighting, Margaret, the whole street can hear them. It's constant. She screams that it was his idea to push for the house sooner. He yells back that she's the one who got greedy and sent the message. They're like animals tearing each other apart." A profound sadness, deep and weary, settled over me. This was the inevitable end of a partnership built on a foundation of greed and betrayal. When the external prized my house, my money was ripped away. All that was left was the rot they had cultivated between them. There was no satisfaction in hearing this, only a hollow ache for the beautiful, hopeful marriage I had once blessed with such joy. The professional fallout, which I learned of through a chance encounter with an old acquaintance from Grace's company, was just as severe. Grace, stripped of her title and banished to a back-office data entry role, was a ghost in her own workplace. "No one will even eat lunch with her, Margaret," the woman told me, her expression a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "She's a pariah. They call her the mom robber behind her back." Richard, too, was stuck, his promotion forever out of reach, his reputation as untrustworthy now cemented among his colleagues. They had become a cautionary tale in our small city, their names synonymous with filial treachery. The public confession had seen to that. Their own friends had abandoned them, their family had turned their backs. They were utterly alone, trapped in a cramped, noisy apartment, with only their resentment and mutual blame for company. The very isolation they had planned for me was now their reality. It was in this context that the letter arrived. It was a plain, white envelope with no return address, but I recognized Grace's handwriting instantly. My name was written in a script that seemed less assured than it once was, the letters trembling slightly. I left it on my kitchen counter for 3 days. It sat there, a silent, pale bomb threatening to detonate the peace I had so carefully built. A part of me, the old Margaret, the mother, was desperate to open it, to hear her voice, to grasp at any straw of reconciliation. The new Margaret, the survivor, saw it for what it likely was. Another manipulation, a desperate plea from someone who had finally hit rock bottom. On the 3rd evening, with Nora by my side for moral support, I finally sliced the envelope open. "Dear Mom," it began, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I have no right to your time, your attention, or even the paper this is written on. But I need you to know that not a single day has passed that I haven't regretted what I did to you. I live with it every moment. It is a constant, suffocating shame." I took a shaky breath, Nora placing a reassuring hand on my arm. "I've been going to therapy," the letter continued. "It was that or lose my mind completely, and through it I've started to understand things. I've started to see that my actions weren't really about the money. That was just the excuse. It was about something much uglier inside of me. The words were different. This wasn't the frantic, self-justifying Grace of the confrontation. This voice was raw, stripped bare. My therapist is helping me see that I had developed a sickness of entitlement. I got so used to you giving, to you sacrificing, that I stopped seeing you as a person. You became a resource, a fixture in my life that was supposed to provide for me, endlessly. I stopped seeing the love in your sacrifices and started seeing them as my due. And when I felt that supply was threatened, when I felt you might actually need something from me in your old age, I panicked. I decided to just take everything before I could lose my access to it. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were not the same as the tears I had cried on the kitchen floor. These were tears of painful, bittersweet recognition. She was finally articulating the unspoken cancer that had rotted our relationship from the inside out. I understand now that you deserved respect, genuine affection, and care in your golden years. Instead, I gave you manipulation, lies, and a cruelty I didn't even know I was capable of. I have lost the best mother in the world because of my own greed and stupidity. That is a truth I have to live with. The letter ended not with a request, but with a stark, simple statement. I don't expect your forgiveness, Mom, because I know I don't deserve it. I just hope you are happy. I hope you have found the peace you always deserved. With love and eternal regret, Grace. I put the letter down, my hands trembling. Nora squeezed my shoulder. Do you need a moment, dear? I shook my head, wiping my eyes. No. It's what I needed to hear. But it doesn't change anything. And it was true. The letter was a monumental step for Grace. It was the first truly honest, unselfish thing she had done in years. It showed a capacity for introspection and remorse I feared had been completely erased. For that, I was grateful. It meant the daughter I raised wasn't entirely dead. But it did not magically heal the chasm between us. It did not erase the sound of her laughter on that audio message. It did not undo the months of psychological terror, the public humiliation, the profound violation of her plotting my death. The wounds had scarred over, thick and strong, and while they no longer hurt, they were a permanent part of my landscape. I took a week to process the letter, to sit with the complex storm of emotions. It stirred sadness, pride in her progress, grief for what was lost, and a firm, unwavering resolve to protect my hard-won peace. Finally, I sat down at my small writing desk and penned a reply. I chose my words with the same care I used in my paintings. Grace, I wrote, I received your letter. I accept your apology, and I am glad to know you are seeking professional help. That is a brave and necessary path. I forgive you. I have forgiven you, because holding on to that anger was a poison in my own heart, and I have worked too hard to clean out the poison. Forgiving you was for me, but forgiving does not mean forgetting. And it does not mean I can ever trust you again. The bridge between us was not just burned, it was detonated, and the canyon it spanned is too deep and too wide to ever cross again. I have, against all odds, found happiness. I have peace. I have a life that is full and meaningful on my own terms. I wish you the best in your journey, but my life is now, and will remain, a life without you in it. With affection, but without a way back. Your mother. I mailed it the next day. There was no anger in the act, only a profound and final sense of closure. I was not slamming a door in rage. I was simply acknowledging that the door was gone, and the house it once led to had long since collapsed. I had built a new house on new land with a stronger foundation, and I would never allow anyone, not even a penitent daughter, to threaten its integrity. The unraveling of Grace and Richard's life was a tragedy, but it was not my tragedy to fix. My responsibility now was to the life I was building, to the joy I was cultivating, to the peace I tended in my new garden. And for the first time since that fateful message, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was equal to the task. A year, it felt like a lifetime and the blink of an eye. Spring had returned, and with it, a sense of renewal that was no longer just a hope but a lived reality. I woke that morning in my beautiful apartment, the sun painting warm stripes across the wooden floor. The white curtains I had chosen myself without anyone's opinion or judgment danced gently in the breeze. This was my sanctuary, my peace, earned through fire. I made my coffee in my small, perfect kitchen and took it out to the balcony. Below, the gardens of the complex were coming to life. I saw Nora leading her morning yoga group, a collection of silver-haired men and women moving with a grace that defied their age. In the distance, Mr. Henderson was already tending to his prize-winning roses. We were a community of survivors, each of us having weathered different storms, now enjoying the calm. "Good morning, Margaret." Nora called up, waving energetically. "Ready for our painting class at the community center today? Arthur says he has a new technique to show us for capturing morning light." "More than ready," I called back, a genuine smile on my face. These old bones, as I had once called them, now felt supple and alive. They carried me to dance classes, on long walks, and to the easel where I had discovered a part of my soul I never knew existed. My life had a rhythm now, a melody composed entirely by me. Mornings were for coffee and contemplation on the balcony. 3 days a week, I volunteered at the Golden Hope Foundation. My role had evolved from a sympathetic ear to something more. I was their unofficial counselor, their living, breathing testament that it was possible to not only survive profound betrayal but to thrive after it. Just that previous week, I had sat with a new arrival, a woman named Eleanor. Her son had convinced her to sign over power of attorney, promising to manage her affairs, and had promptly sold her home and deposited her in a dismal care facility. She was broken, her spirit crushed. "They told me I was a burden," she whispered, her eyes hollow. "That I was too much trouble. I believed them." I took her hand, my own, now steady and strong, covering her frail, trembling one. "Eleanor," I said, my voice soft but firm. "They told me the same thing. They said I was confused, a nuisance, a bitter old woman. They were lies, designed to make us compliant, to make it easier to steal from us." I told her my story, not all of it, but enough. I told her about the voice message, the forged papers, the fight back. Her eyes widened as I spoke. You took them to court?" I defended myself. I corrected gently. "And you can too. Your story is not over yet, Eleanor. This is just a terrible chapter. The most important lesson I learned is that our value does not come from what we can do for others, but from our inherent right to dignity. And it is never, ever too late to claim it." I saw a flicker of light in her eyes, the first spark of the fighter she used to be. That spark was my legacy. It was more valuable to me than any inheritance. Under the Foundation's guidance, we began the process of challenging the power of attorney. We were writing a new ending for her story. This was my purpose now. With the legal knowledge I had gained and the hard-earned wisdom from my own ordeal, I had helped dozens of seniors like Eleanor. We had recovered stolen funds, reversed fraudulent declarations, and found safe havens. We were an army of the wise, fighting back against the predators who saw our age as a weakness. One afternoon, as I was organizing files at the Foundation, my phone buzzed. It was Attorney Ford. "Miss Baker." His voice was warm, familiar. "I hope I'm not disturbing your peace." "Not at all, Harrison," I said. We had moved to a first-name basis somewhere between the lawsuit and the settlement. "What can I do for you?" "I have some news that I think will interest you," he said. "The ripple effects of your case are still being felt. I've just been contacted by a firm in the next county. They're dealing with 3 new cases that bear a striking resemblance to yours. Adult children, forged documents, attempts to declare parents incompetent to seize assets. I listened, a familiar, determined energy humming through me. It was not the energy of battle, but of mission. The families of the victims, he continued. They're terrified and don't know where to turn. They've heard about your case, about how you fought back. They want to know how you did it. They're asking if you would be willing to share your experience to advise them, to give them a roadmap. I didn't need to think about it. My journey through hell would now serve as a guide for others lost in the same darkness. Of course, I replied without hesitation. Tell them I am completely willing to share my story. If what I went through can help even one person find the strength to defend themselves, then it will have served a purpose greater than just my own survival. I thought you'd say that, Harrison said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I'll set up a meeting. That evening, as I stood at my easel, adding the final highlights to a painting of the mountains at dawn, I reflected on the incredible, painful, and ultimately triumphant journey of the last 18 months. I had been stripped of everything I thought defined me, my role as a mother, my identity as a self-sacrificing woman. In that barren space, I had been forced to find out who I was when all those labels were torn away. I had discovered Margaret, the artist. Margaret, the advocate. Margaret, the friend. Margaret, the free woman. My phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Nora. Margaret, a group of us are heading to that new Italian restaurant downtown. The one with the fabulous tiramisu. Let's go celebrate life. As I got ready to go out, I paused in front of the full-length mirror. The woman who looked back at me was a stranger in the best possible way. Her eyes shone with a confidence that came from self-knowledge, not from the approval of others. Her posture was upright, proud. Her smile was genuine, unburdened. The lines on her face were not just marks of age, but etchings of wisdom and resilience. Margaret, I said to my reflection, at 67 years old, you have finally learned that your life belongs only to you, and you deserve to live it with dignity, joy, and peace. At the restaurant, surrounded by Nora and my new chosen family friends who valued me for my spirit, not for what I could give them, we raised our glasses. To new beginnings, Nora declared. To the wisdom that comes with age, added Arthur, my painting instructor. To the courage to do what's right no matter the cost, I said, my voice clear and strong. As the clink of our glasses faded, I thought of all the women and men who were at that very moment sitting in silent desperation, believing the lies their families told them, convinced they had no options, that enduring abuse was the price of family love. If my story could reach just one of them, if it could give one person the courage to pick up the phone, to call a lawyer, to say, no more, then every moment of the pain I had endured would have been worth it. Because the greatest inheritance we can leave is not money or property. It is the courage to be true to ourselves. It is the knowledge that it is never too late to choose dignity over convenience, truth over false peace, and self-love over destructive sacrifice. And it is never ever too late to be free. Winter arrived, draping the gardens in a soft, silent blanket of white. It was a season of introspection, of drawing inward, and I found a new kind of contentment in the quiet rhythm of my days. The frantic energy of the legal battle, the urgent mission of helping others, it had all settled into a deep, steady hum of purpose. My life was no longer a reaction to trauma. It was a conscious, daily creation. My painting had flourished. The Protector, the oak tree painting, had sold at the Golden Hope auction for a staggering $5,000, money that directly funded legal aid for 3 more seniors. The success wasn't in the price, but in the conversation it started. People saw the strength in the gnarled branches, the hope in the young saplings. They saw a story of resilience, and they wanted to be a part of it. Arthur, my instructor, had become a dear friend. We spent hours in his sun-drenched studio at the community center, him patiently guiding me, not to mimic his style, but to refine my own. "You have a unique voice, Margaret," he told me one afternoon as I worked on a new piece, a stormy sea crashing against unyielding cliffs. "Your paintings aren't just pretty, they have a backbone. They tell a story of surviving the storm, not just of the calm that follows." I smiled, adding a highlight to the crest of a wave. "I suppose you can't unlive the storms, Arthur. They become part of your palette." He was right. My art was the final, most profound stage of my healing. It was where I processed the lingering, complex emotions that words couldn't capture. The deep cobalt of my grief for the daughter I lost. The fiery crimson of my righteous anger. The soft, healing gold of the peace I had forged. I was no longer running from my past. I was using its colors to create my future. This quiet season was also a time of small, personal revolutions. I learned to cook for one, discovering the joy of making exactly what I craved, whether it was an elaborate recipe or simply toast and tea. I devoured books I'd never had time for, joined a book club where we debated literature with passionate intensity, and even, to my own astonishment, started a small blog at Nora's urging titled "The Second Spring, Blooming After 60. I wrote not about the specifics of my betrayal, but about the universal lessons, the courage of setting boundaries, the joy of rediscovering lost passions, the art of building a chosen family. Women from across the country wrote to me, sharing their own stories. My small circle of hope was widening into a vast network. One evening, as I was writing a post about the importance of financial independence, my phone lit up with a notification. It was a news alert from the local paper. The headline was brief and brutal. "Local couple files for bankruptcy." I didn't need to click the link to know who it was. Miss Rose, ever my faithful, if sometimes grim, news service, called minutes later. "It's official, Margaret," she said, her voice a mixture of satisfaction and pity. "The IRS debt, the legal fees from your case, the credit cards, it was too much. They've lost everything. The apartment, what was left of their credit, it's all gone." I felt a hollow ache, but no surprise. This was the final, logical conclusion of the path they had chosen. The house of cards built on fraud and greed had collapsed. I wondered, briefly, where they would go, what they would do, but I did not wonder for long. That was their journey now, their karma to navigate. My compassion for them was a quiet, distant thing, like feeling sorrow for characters in a tragic play. It no longer had the power to pull me back into their drama. The true testament to my healing came a week later. I was at the grocery store, deliberating over avocados, when I saw them. They were at the end of the produce aisle, looking at a display of oranges. They looked diminished, not just financially, but spiritually. Richard's shoulders were hunched, his once confident posture gone. Grace looked thin, her hair pulled back in a careless ponytail, her coat looking worn at the cuffs. They were discussing something in low, tense voices, a world away from the conspiratorial whispers they had once shared in my kitchen. Our eyes met. A jolt of something recognition, sadness, a finality passed between us. For a moment, no one moved. I saw a flicker of something in Grace's eyes, shame, regret, a plea. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a defensive hardness. I did not look away. I did not cross the aisle. I simply gave a small, slow nod, an acknowledgement, not an invitation. It was the nod you might give a stranger you recognize from a long-ago time, a silent wish for their journey, whatever it may be. I saw Richard's hand tighten on the cart. He leaned down and said something sharp to Grace, and they turned and hurried down the aisle, away from me. I stood there, among the bright, vibrant fruits and vegetables, and felt nothing. No anger, No vindication, no overwhelming grief. There was only a profound, peaceful acceptance. The chapter was closed. The ink was dry. I finished my shopping, my heart calm. When I returned to my apartment, I placed the groceries on the counter and went straight to my easel. I didn't plan the painting, I simply let my hands move. I used the softest blues and lavenders, the most gentle greens. I painted the first, delicate hints of spring emerging from the melting snow. I painted the promise of new life, not as a dramatic event, but as a quiet, inevitable truth. This was my life now. It was not defined by the storm, but by the profound, colorful peace that had settled in its wake. The battles were over. The work continued, but it was work I loved, work that fed my soul. I had my art, my friends, my purpose, my peace. I had finally learned that the most beautiful masterpiece a person can create is not a painting on a canvas, but a life lived with intention, courage, and unshakable self-respect. And I, Margaret, at 67 years young, was my own greatest work of art. The spring that followed felt like the first true spring of my life. It wasn't just the world outside that was blooming. It was something deep within me, a final, tender layer of healing that had taken its time to form. The sharp edges of the past had been softened by time and purpose, rounded into smooth stones I could hold in my hand without cutting myself. The work at the foundation, the vibrant community at the gardens, the quiet satisfaction of my art, they had woven together to form a tapestry of a life that was not just good, but deeply, authentically rich. It was on a morning spent volunteering that the call came. I was helping Eleanor, the woman whose son had stolen her home, pack a small suitcase. We had successfully challenged the power of attorney, and she was moving into a lovely, assisted living community just a few blocks from the gardens, a place she had chosen herself, a far cry from the dismal facility her son had dumped her in. "You see, Eleanor," I said, folding a soft, hand-knitted sweater and placing it in her case. "A new chapter. Your own kitchenette, a balcony, people your own age to play cards with." She looked around the small, sunny room that was to be her new home. Her eyes, once hollow, now bright with cautious excitement. I never believed I could have this. I thought my story was over." She reached out and squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You gave me back my pen, Margaret. You showed me I could still write it." It was in that moment, filled with the profound satisfaction of a life redirected, that my phone vibrated in my pocket. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. The number was unfamiliar, but with a prestigious area code. "Is this Margaret Baker?" a woman's crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "My name is Evelyn Reed. I'm the senior producer for the Diana Moss Show. We've been made aware of your story through some legal channels and your advocacy work with the Golden Hope Foundation." I leaned against the cool wall, my mind reeling. The Diana Moss Show. It was the nation's premier afternoon talk show, a platform known for its powerful, human interest stories that reached millions. "We are producing a special series on resilience in later life," Evelyn continued. "Stories of individuals who have faced profound personal challenges and not only rebuilt their lives but have used their experience to empower others. Your name was at the top of our list." She paused, letting the weight of the invitation settle. "We would be honored if you would join us in New York City next week as our guest. We want you to tell your story, Margaret, the whole story." The hallway seemed to tilt. Tell my story? On national television? The thought was simultaneously terrifying and electrifying. For so long, my story had been a private wound, then a source of strength for a small, specific community. To share it with millions felt like stepping onto a vast, unknown stage, completely exposed. I need to think about this," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "Of course. Evelyn said smoothly. Take 24 hours. We'll cover all expenses, first class. We believe your message is too important not to be heard. I ended the call and stood in the quiet hallway, the sounds of Eleanor happily unpacking her china mugs a distant murmur. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The Diana Moss Show. My first instinct was a resounding no. It felt like tempting fate, like digging up a grave I had worked so hard to peacefully tend. I had my peace, my quiet, purposeful life. Why risk it? Why open myself up to the scrutiny, the potential judgment, the inevitable reliving of the pain? I drove home in a daze. That evening, instead of painting, I sat on my balcony, the invitation hanging over me like a specter. I thought of the women in my online community, of the families who had sat in my living room, of Chloe fighting for her father. I thought of the power that had come from hearing someone say, "I know how you feel. I've been there." And then I thought of the others, the ones still trapped in silent shame, believing the lies their families told them, thinking they were alone in their suffering. They wouldn't be in my workshop. They wouldn't be reading my blog. They would be sitting in their lonely living rooms, watching afternoon television, feeling utterly, completely hopeless. What if my voice could reach them? Nora found me there an hour later, still staring into the twilight. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, pulling up a chair. "I think I have," I replied, and I told her about the call. Her reaction was immediate and unequivocal. "Margaret, you have to do it. This is incredible. This is your message, your mission, on the biggest stage possible. But the exposure, Nora, Grace, Richard. To hell with them," she said, her eyes blazing with protective fire. "This isn't about them anymore. This is about you. This is about all the people you haven't been able to reach yet. This is your legacy, shouting from the rooftops." Her words echoed in the quiet space my fear had created. She was right. This wasn't about reopening old wounds. It was about using the scars as a map for others who were lost. The next morning, I called Evelyn Reed back. "I'll do it," I said, my voice clear and steady. The following week was a whirlwind. A stylist came to my apartment to help me choose an outfit, a sophisticated, deep amethyst pantsuit that spoke of wisdom and authority, not victimhood. I worked with a segment producer, a kind young man named Ben, who helped me shape my narrative. We weren't going to focus on the salacious details of the betrayal, but on the arc, the dismantling, the awakening, the rebuilding, the empowering. "We want the takeaway to be hope, Margaret," Ben told me over a video call. "We want people to see you and think, if she can do that, then maybe I can too." The night before I flew to New York, I couldn't sleep. I was a 67-year-old woman who had spent most of her life within a 50-mile radius, and I was about to go on national television. The fear was a live wire in my chest. But beneath it, thrumming with a powerful, steady beat, was a sense of rightness. This was the final step in my transformation, from private victim to public advocate. The flight, the sleek hotel, the bustling green room at the studio, it was all a surreal dream. I sat in the makeup chair, a kind woman dusting my face with powder, and looked at my reflection. I saw the woman in the crimson suit who had left her house with a plan. I saw the survivor. I saw the protector. And now, I was about to become the messenger. A production assistant led me to the side of the iconic stage. The audience was a murmur beyond the heavy curtains. I could hear Diana Moss's famous voice, warm and engaging, finishing the segment before mine. "And now," she said, her tone shifting to one of gravity and respect, "we have a very special guest. Her story is one of the most profound I've encountered in my career. After a betrayal that would have broken most people, she not only fought back with incredible courage and intelligence, but she has dedicated her life to helping others do the same." Please welcome, advocate and survivor, Margaret Baker. The music swelled. The curtains parted. The lights were blinding. For a single, heart-stopping second, I froze. Then, I took a deep breath, remembered the thousands of Eleanors and Davids and Chloes who needed to hear this, and I walked onto the stage, my head held high, ready to turn my pain into a national anthem of hope. The lights were a physical force, a wall of white heat that erased the individual faces in the audience, transforming them into a single, expectant entity. The sound of applause was a roaring ocean in my ears. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the pounding of my own blood. Then, my eyes met Diana Moss's. She was sitting in a comfortable armchair, her expression not one of theatrical pity, but of genuine, focused interest. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. That was all I needed. The training, the preparation, the deep, resonant purpose, it all clicked into place. The fear didn't vanish, but it was relegated to a distant corner, a faint whisper drowned out by the conviction that now had a microphone. "Margaret, welcome," Diana said, her voice a soothing balm in the surreal intensity of the moment. She gestured to the armchair opposite hers. "Thank you for having the immense courage to be here today." "Thank you for inviting me, Diana," I said, my voice clear and surprisingly steady. I sat, smoothing the elegant lines of my amethyst suit, a gesture that grounded me. "We've heard a little about your story," she began, leaning forward slightly. "A betrayal from a loved one that is almost unimaginable. But what I find so compelling is not the betrayal itself, but what you did in its wake. You didn't just survive. You built a fortress out of the rubble. Can you tell us about that moment? The moment you decided to fight back?" I took a slow breath. This was it. The story I had lived and relived was now a gift I was about to give to millions. It began with a voice message. I started, and the studio fell into a profound silence. I didn't delve into the specific, cruel words they were mine to keep. Instead, I spoke of the feeling. It was the sound of my own daughter planning my funeral while I was still very much alive. The feeling wasn't just heartbreak. It was a profound erasure. She wasn't just taking my house or my money. She was trying to steal my mind, my story, my very right to exist as a capable human being. I saw Diana and several audience members nod, a shared understanding passing between us. And in that moment, on my kitchen floor, something broke. I continued, but it wasn't me that broke. It was the illusion. The illusion that sacrifice equals love. The illusion that family is an unconditional blank check. What was left when that illusion shattered was a very simple, very clear reality. I had to save myself. I spoke of the crimson suit not as a fashion choice, but as a psychological armor. I described my trip to the bank as a strategic mission to reclaim my autonomy. I talked about confronting Carol not with rage, but with the cold, hard power of truth. The greatest weapon they used wasn't forgery or fraud, I told a captivated Diana. It was shame. They wanted me to be ashamed of my age, my supposed confusion, my need for help. The most revolutionary thing I did was to reject that shame. I decided that my dignity was non-negotiable. Diana listened, her intelligent eyes reflecting the gravity of my words. "And now, you've taken that revolution public. You volunteer, you counsel, you've become a source of strength for so many. What is the one message you want people to take away from your story today?" I looked past the blinding lights, imagining the countless living rooms where people were watching, perhaps with a sinking feeling of recognition in their own lives. "I want them to know that it is never too late to change your story," I said, my voice gaining strength, filling the studio. "That your value does not decrease with age. That love should not hurt, should not diminish you, should not plot your demise. Setting a boundary is not cruelty, It is the ultimate act of self-respect. And if the people in your life cannot respect that boundary, then the problem is not your boundary. The problem is their disrespect. The audience erupted in applause, but it was different now. It wasn't the polite applause for a guest. It was the resonant, heartfelt applause of people who had been given a new vocabulary for their own pain. And to the children, the family members who might be watching, I said, turning slightly to address the camera directly, my gaze firm but not unkind, see your elders, truly see them. See the lives they've lived, the battles they've fought, the wisdom they carry. Do not look at them and see a burden or a bank account. See a person, honor them. Because the legacy you create with them will be the one you leave behind. The segment ended too soon. Back in the green room, a strange quiet settled over me. The adrenaline faded, leaving a profound and utter exhaustion, but also a deep, humming peace. I had done it. I had spoken my truth into the world, and the world had listened. The impact was immediate and staggering. By the time my flight landed back home, my blog had crashed from the traffic. My email inbox was flooded with thousands of messages. They came from daughters whose brothers were exploiting their mothers, from sons whose sisters were isolating their fathers, from elderly men and women who had been silently enduring emotional and financial abuse, believing they had no recourse. You gave me the words I couldn't find. I saw your show and called a lawyer the next day. I finally told my son no after watching you. Thank you. You are my hero. I was no longer just Margaret from the gardens. I had become a symbol, a lighthouse. A month after the show aired, Harrison Ford called, his voice brimming with a kind of professional awe. Margaret, you've started a movement. The Golden Hope Foundation has received a record number of donations earmarked for your legal aid program. State legislators are calling, wanting to draft stronger elder abuse laws named after you. They're calling it Margaret's Law. I sat down, the weight of it all pressing down on me, not as a burden, but as a sacred responsibility. My personal pain had become a political force. It was more than I had ever dreamed possible. That evening, I celebrated not with a fancy dinner, but quietly, on my balcony with Nora. We drank tea and watched the stars emerge. You did it, my friend, she said, her voice soft. You turned your poison into everyone else's medicine. I looked out at the tranquil courtyard of the gardens, at the safe, peaceful world I had built for myself. It was a world I was now helping to build for countless others. The journey that began with a single, devastating message had led here. To a platform, a purpose, a legacy. The story of Margaret and Grace was forever part of me, a foundational scar, but it no longer defined me. I was defined by the hope I fostered, the courage I inspired, the lives I helped reclaim. I had found my voice, and in doing so, I had become a voice for the voiceless. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that this was only the beginning. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.